Thank you, Tatiana. To today's top story now, and it's this. Is Kemi Badenoch colluding with Sir Keir Starmer to deny democracy? Well, GBNews can today confirm that two Tory councils, East Sussex and West Sussex, they are requesting to cancel next May's local elections, and that would deny 1.2 million Brits the right to vote. That's despite the shadow local government minister, James Cleverly, telling GBNews just this morning that he wanted those very same elections to go ahead.
Absolutely should not be cancelling elections. What we've seen is the Labour government, both arrogant and naive and cocky, thinking they can completely restructure English local government all in one go. And of course, they've bitten off far too much. And what we now see in the opinion polls is that they are almost certainly going to have a really, really difficult night in those elections. And they've used their ineptitude as an excuse to hide from the voters. And it stinks, and we are completely against it.
So, he stinks, and he's completely against it, except the Conservatives now are in favour of it. Well, I'm joined in the studio to discuss this with our political editor, Christopher Hope, and also the head of policy at Reform UK, Zia Yusuf. Zia Yusuf, I shall come to you first. You heard James Cleverly there denouncing, saying, we're completely against cancelling elections, and it stinks. And yet we've seen a sudden U-turn this afternoon.
Well, what we've seen is two Tory councils already, we haven't heard from many others, two Tory councils already have said that they will deny democracy, denied vote to over 1 million people inside those two particular councils. Only dictators cancel elections. And what is happening now is the Tories and Labour are colluding and responding to the fact that their voters hate them and want to turf them out by denying their voters the ability to vote and turf them out. And in many ways, the Tories are worse than Labour here, because as you just heard, James Cleverly coming on here just this morning saying, that this is appalling, that, this is arrogance, the elections must go ahead. Max Kendricks in The Times in October, serious journalist in a serious newspaper, said it was the Tory councils, the Tory-controlled councils who were lobbying the government to delay the elections again. That's why Keir Starmer said, over to you, 63 councils. You decide whether they get delayed or not. Of those 63 councils, Martin, nobody is defending more seats than the Tories. It's disgraceful. It's disgusting. And that's probably the worst thing about this of all, which is that it's duplicitous, it's dishonest. The Tories basically think that your viewers, that the British public, the British voters, are basically idiots. And what this is, therefore, are a bunch of turkeys claiming that Christmas must happen at any cost. It's really important that Christmas happens. All the while plotting to deny
isn't this local
to deny British people the right to vote.
Yusuf, they're not cancelled, they're postponed. They will happen next year. Sir James Cleverly says, let me finish. Sir James Cleverly says their position is clear. They should go ahead. He's not saying I can order them to go ahead. So there's a position within the party when you can't have the central office ordering local council leaders what to do.
Well, I think viewers can make their own minds up about this, and that's why I think the fundamental problem is the Tories seem to think that voters are mugs. You say that they're being postponed. Yeah, that's the line this year. I recall them saying that when? Last year. They said that literally last year. They made exactly the same argument. They said, we're going to postpone them. They're postponing them again. Last year, it was 5 million. If you add up what they're now proposing to cancel, potentially, the mayorals and the locals together, that's over 9 million people, according to the Times. That's well over 10% of the population of this country that are not going to get to vote to turf out their councillors 2 years running. And I want to say one more thing. The Electoral Commission, Chris, the Electoral Commission today, hardly renowned friends of Nigel Farage or Reform, I might say, but to their credit have come out and say they see absolutely no reason for these elections to not go ahead. The only reason they're not is because the Tories and Labour will get electorally annihilated, and therefore Starmer and Kemi's positions will come under enormous pressure.
That statement I have here from the Electoral Commission, Vio Rangarajan, the Chief Executive. They're disappointed by the timing and substance, they say. They should go ahead as planned, the elections, they say. As a matter of principle, they say, capacity constraints. That's because the councils say we can't do a shake-up by local government and organise elections at the same time. Those capacity constraints, they are not a legitimate reason for delaying long-planned elections. Extending these existing mandates beyond where they should be because of the election being postponed risk affecting the legitimacy of local decision-making and damaging public confidence. That's what's happening here. So the rights of these councils to be there is being affected, and we're hearing that from the Commission. But let me ask you one question. If you were in post and you faced face maybe an insurgent party, maybe a rebuilding Tory party after your promised election win next time around, if that happens, maybe you may be tempted to say, well, let's just go easy on some of these timescales.
No, we wouldn't, because democracy is actually very important. Yeah, absolutely. Democracy is incredibly important. And here's the thing. It's not actually going to work out well for them, Chris, in the long run. You know, they can squat. As far as I'm concerned, these are now hundreds of Tory councillors are going to effectively be illegitimate squatters in their offices. And as and when there is ultimately an opportunity to turf these people out, that turquoise wave that they are trying to postpone it is only going to crash down twice as hard.
Councillors have told us today, we had a Conservative councillor on from Thames side. He said there's a legitimate concern because of the cost. So they are saying, what's the point of having an election in May when there'll be one next May anyway? It's going to cost millions of pounds that councils don't have. So they're making an economic argument.
Why not?
That?
Why they cancel all elections forever then? Let's save the money. I mean, come on, this is an absolute nonsense. Democracy is a core part of the fabric of this country. And we were just speaking before the cameras started rolling. You know, we're exploring multiple legal options. I want to be crystal clear that this country obviously has no written constitution, right? So when governing parties collude with the official opposition to deny democracy to millions of people in this country, not just 1 year, but to do it for a second year, I'm telling people it is crystal clear. It is vitally important that they stand up, they write to their MPs, they make their voices heard that this is unacceptable.
So we're living in a time of what feels like pretty significant social change, and it makes us question things that we've even taken for granted for decades. And one of those at the moment that people are wondering about is actually money. Is the money in your bank account safe? Should you be investing elsewhere? Are we looking at a potential global crash? What will it mean for your savings? Is there a way that you could be using your money that might be outside of government control even? Well, TallyMoney is potentially one solution. So I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by the CEO and founder of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. What is TallyMoney?
Well, at TallyMoney, you basically get gold you can spend. So we give people an individual account in their name, everyday account. They get a sort code and account number. They use that account just like they would pounds from their bank, but it's milligrams of gold that we brand as Tally.
Okay. Why would you do that, though? What is the benefit to the customer instead of just having a normal pound sterling account?
Gold's performance against the pound is above 11% per annum over the last 25 years on average. But we still need money in our daily lives, and we have savings. We know that it's good common sense and prudent to save up for things, not just live in credit. You know, whether it's a holiday or a rainy day, your retirement planning, you need to have money in your life, basically, that you can rely on, that's dependable, that nobody meddles with, that nobody can weaponise against you, which is another element of government control when it's the government currency, which we could talk about another time. And it should be pretty simple and straightforward, and that's what we deliver at Tally. And really, we just want people to feel safe and happy with their money. There was a time when the bigger your bank balance, the more confident you felt. Now it's like, I need to do something with it. I can't leave it there. In Tally, you can.
Okay, brilliant. Cameron Parry from TallyMoney, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bev.
Will you do in the new year? You're looking at maybe a JR, a judicial review of the reasoning behind this?
We're exploring multiple things, yes. So JR is absolutely on the table there. We will have more to announce in that regard. I want to reassure everyone watching this, everything that we have in our power legally to do, we will do to try to force these elections to happen. I will say this, it's very hard, even though we're at 30% plus in the polls, you know, we've led 170 polls in a row now. You know, when you've got the Tories and Labour, the government of the day, and the official opposition, although some opposition they clearly are, colluding to try to prevent these elections from happening, it is very difficult, but we'll throw everything we can at them.
Zia, something that strikes me. I talk to politicians all the time, councillors, national politicians. They don't seem to have got their head around some things since Brexit, and that is democracy is priceless. It's not about the money, it's about the concept, and more to the point, the denial of democracy infuriates people. It utterly infuriates them. It started with Brexit, and we seem to have a political class that thinks they can just ride roughshod over the rules.
100%. And using money as an excuse. This country has a £1.2 trillion a year annual budget, spends £14 billion a year on foreign aid, spends £8 billion a year on welfare for foreign nationals in the form of universal credit alone. And they have the cheek to say that money is the reason why they want to deny their own voters the ability to vote in these elections. I think you're absolutely right. And I want to emphasise again to GBNews viewers, do not take this stuff for granted. As I said, we're spending a lot of time with some of the leading lawyers in this country. A lot of what we have become accustomed to in this country are norms. We don't have a written constitution. This is an extremely dangerous time, and precedent is now being set that a prime minister with the opposition can go, it's not looking good for us, let's try and delay elections. That's a very, very dangerous thing to be happening.
Just very quickly on the idea of a written constitution, should we have the right to a jury trial enshrined in law rather than just in Magna Carta, which can be ignored by this government and is being ignored? And should we have the right to have these elections on time in a written constitution? Would reform do that?
So reform is working on a Bill of Rights, Chris, and we've already been public about that. That work is already in flow, and that's exactly the sort of thing we would do. I would say this, though, that without a written constitution, in the end, Parliament is sovereign and no Parliament can bind a future one. We will do everything we can. Prime Minister Farage and a reform government will do everything we can to enshrine those things. But they're withdrawing the right to a jury trial, which is a human right in this country since the Magna Carta. They're now delaying elections for millions and millions of people again. The Attorney General of this country has been launching political and personal attacks against the man who is favourite to turf out his boss from office.
Don't start grabbing your pearls and worrying about that. These are politicians attacking politicians.
There are norms and conventions around the Attorney General of this country demanding an apology from Nigel Farage for something for which he has not been convicted of. So again, you're talking about someone who sets the tone judicially in this country. That's the point I'm making.
So, Yusuf, thank you very much. Stick with us. I'd like to bring in my next guest now, beg your pardon. That's the political strategist, and it's Stuart Thompson. Stuart, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have your company. You've no doubt been listening in there. There's a feeling, not just amongst Reform voters, but Liberal Democrat voters, Green Party voters, voters all across the nation. This is a denial of democracy. And my question is quite simple. What are the political classes afraid of?
I don't know, they're afraid of anything. What they're trying to do is put a new local government system in place that is more reflective of democracy. And the idea this morning, people were busy blaming the government, the Labour government, for cancelling elections. Now we're blaming the Tories. Then we're saying it's some sort of, collusion, whereas James Cleverly's comments, I think, quite clearly show that the Conservatives, I don't think, are particularly capable of doing that at the moment, particularly between the national and local levels, as Christopher alluded to earlier as well. So it's not afraid of going for democracy. It's putting those new structures in place. And I think what we're really missing, and what's being missed in a lot of this debate, is the impact on the councillors themselves. Now, councillors are a huge part of our democratic process. And what we're saying to people is, well, put yourself forward for a year, go through that, do the campaigning, but you might only be there for a year, and then you're going to have to stand again.
They've already put it back by 1 year, Stuart.
Those people. Sorry,
this is the second time they've kicked the can down the road. It's already been put back by 1 year. This would be another extension. Some of these people won't face election in 7 years.
Look, the idea that these things are, infinite delayed isn't going to happen. This is because of the new structures being put in place and a single tier for local authorities, which will bring democracy and the identification of local politics closer to people. So is it ideal? No, of course it's not. But is it some mass conspiracy to try and sort of, do in reform? And no, it's not. It is simply getting the timings right. As Yusuf mentioned, costs. I mean, it's quite interesting that, we're going to pay for loads of jewellery trials. We're going to sort out that problem. We're going to spend lots of money on, whereas when they've gone into and run Kent County Council, actually they found that the real problem with, looking at costs across local government is that local government has already been pared to the bone. The idea they've got a few million quid sitting down the back of the sofa is pie in the sky. So, look, let's be real. Let's have a discussion about local democracy. Let's have a discussion about local government structures. Let's engage on those issues rather than trying to claim that this is some glorified stitch-up to stop reform winning seats.
Stuart, there's an alternative reality on this, and it's the by-elections that we've seen in 2025, or certainly since the general election. The Labour Party has been annihilated. 44 seats down, net. And the net winners by a country mile are Reform UK, who put 68 seats on. The political barometer is completely changed. The metronome is moving so quick, and the losers in this landscape will be the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. The winners will be new parties like Reform and also the Liberal Democrats, Plaid Cymru, the Greens. It's not just a Nigel Farage debate. This is the old guard terrified of change. And I put it to you, you look like cowards.
Well, it's not me personally, but what I would say to you is that's a very partial reading of those results, and it takes a huge, you're massively jumping ahead and assuming that because the polls and assuming that the last year, the by-elections.
Well, the polls are wrong. Let people vote.
Well, but again, we need to separate the things, the separating of the election and the delays and the separating of local government and structures and democracy. These are several issues which are being brought together in a sort of way to try and say that the government is eroding democracy. The government is listening to those local councils that are deciding. It is their decision. And the government hasn't made any final decisions anyway. It comes, I believe, in January anyway. So it's listening to those local councils and what they want to do. This isn't the government deciding one way or another.
OK, Stuart Thompson, thank you very much for joining us. I wish you a very, very Merry Christmas. Yusuf, I'd like you to have a quick response. Now, you were guffawing away, you were chewing the desk. Every emotion and humanity came out of you there. What's your response? They were basically saying there that it's democracy to delay democracy.
I was trying to follow the argument. I think his argument, if I heard correctly, was it's really important that we protect the structures of democracy. He used the word structures of democracy multiple times. The way you preserve the structures of democracy, according to him, is by cancelling elections for 5 million people last year and cancelling elections for another 9 million people this year. I don't know where he's learning about the structures of democracy. What we need to do is allow the British people to vote. And look, you talk about the polls. Everybody understands what's about to happen. There's going to be a total electoral annihilation of both Labour and the Tories this May, and as a result, both Kemi and Starmer's position will be close to untenable.
We're a long way from those elections. They are in May and we're in December now. £9 million is the cost across Sussex of having these elections. That's why they're delaying. The councils have no money left. You'll find that in your councils you control. Where do they find the money? They can't afford to have an election which have councillors in there for only a couple of years.
Chris, so you're a smart man. So let's take your argument to its logical conclusion. We should never have elections again?
OK, gentlemen, we have to leave it there. Yusuf, Chris Hope, superb debate. Now, spokesperson for West Sussex Council has told GBNews that the request for election delays was included in their initial submission for their preferred configuration of future unitaries, if you understand that. And a spokesperson for East Sussex has told GB News it'll be unfair to expect new councillors to serve such a truncated term.